Hey everyone, today we're digging into a secret that's hiding in plain sight on pretty much every property report. We're talking about two simple dates that, believe it or not, can literally make or break a $1 million deal. You might be shocked by how much power they really hold.
Okay, so picture this. Someone hands you this report. It says a property is worth $1 million. Simple enough, right? But here's the thing. The most important question isn't how much. The real question is, when was it worth that? And the answer to that question changes absolutely everything.
So we've got two main players here, the valuation date and the report date. You'll see them right next to each other on the page, and it's so easy to just assume they're kind of the same thing. But one of these is the legal and financial anchor for the entire report, and the other is basically just a postmark. So which one is it?
All right, let's break it all down. To really get why these dates are so important, we have to decode what they actually mean and why the difference between them is so critical. First up, let's talk about the hero of our story, the valuation date. The absolute best way to think about this is as a snapshot in time. It's like the appraiser hits a pause button, freezing the property and all the market conditions around it on one single day. Everything from interest rates to local building projects gets locked into that one moment.
The whole point of the valuation date is to answer one single question, and only one question. As of what date is this property worth this amount? That's it. Every piece of data, every single comparison, every conclusion in that entire report has to point right back to that specific date.
And then we've got its partner, the report date. Now, if the valuation date is when the snapshot was taken, the report date is just the day the photo was printed. It's purely administrative. It just marks the day the appraiser finished up their work and signed the document. It has zero to do with the property's actual value.
Okay, so one date is the moment of value. The other is just a timestamp. Why is this such a big deal? Well, this is where it all gets real. Because this distinction has massive financial and legal consequences.
You know, property value is never static. It's always a moving target. A new subway line gets announced, boom, value changes. Zoning laws get tweaked, value changes. The market sentiment just shifts a little, and a property's worth can swing wildly in just a matter of months, sometimes even weeks. The valuation date anchors the opinion to a single point in that constantly changing world.
And get this. In a lot of high-stakes situations, the law itself actually dictates what the valuation date must be. For settling an estate, for example, the value has to be as of the date of death, period. For bank lending, it's often tied to the date of underwriting. Using the wrong date doesn't just make for a bad report, it can make it legally useless and totally derail the whole deal. Okay, so what if you need to know a property's value not for today, but for some time in the past? This introduces a really fascinating challenge for appraisers called retrospective valuation.
I mean, seriously, how would an appraiser figure out what a property was worth on, say, June 30th, 2021? They can't just look at today's market, right? This takes a special kind of financial detective work where they have to go digging into the past. So the official term for this is retrospective valuation. And for this to be legit, the appraiser can only use facts that were known or could have been known as of that past date. They basically have to hop in a time machine and force themselves to forget everything that's happened since. And that leads us to the absolute golden rule of this kind of work. It's so important it gets its own section, the rule against hindsight. To put it simply, when you're looking back, you are absolutely forbidden from using a crystal ball. The reason for this rule is to avoid this really powerful psychological trap called hindsight bias. You know that feeling of, oh, I knew that was going to happen, right? It's that temptation to let future events color your judgment about the past. Like knowing a neighborhood boomed in 2023 makes it incredibly hard not to think it was obviously more valuable back in 2020. But for an appraiser, that's a big no-no. Let's just walk through a super clear example of how this goes wrong. So an appraiser sets a valuation date in 2020. 3 years later, in 2023, there's this unexpected market boom. If that appraiser uses data from that future boom to try and justify a higher value back in 2020, they've just committed a massive professional error. The whole analysis has to be based only on what was known or foreseeable back then. So now that we know the theory and the big pitfalls, let's talk about solutions. How can you, when you're reading one of these reports, spot if it's solid or if it's full of holes? Well, it all comes down to checking for consistency. A huge red flag is a report that's basically at war with itself. Just look at this timeline. The report says the value is as of December 31st, 2024.
But then, it uses zoning info from a 2025 rule and sales data from the middle of 2026 to back it up. The evidence doesn't match the date. That makes the report internally inconsistent, and you just can't trust it.
So here you go. Here's a practical checklist of the most common mistakes. Is the appraiser getting the report date and the valuation date mixed up? Are they using hindsight? Are they forgetting to even mention other key dates, like when they actually inspected the property? Asking these questions will help you sort the good reports from the bad ones.
Really, it all boils down to this one core distinction. The valuation date, that's all about market reality, it has huge legal significance, and it determines all the evidence. The report date, that's just admin. Getting this difference is the key to understanding the whole appraisal.
And look, if you take away just one thing from all this, please let it be this powerful, simple rule. The value speaks only as of the valuation date. The report date speaks only to when the appraisal was completed. They are not the same thing. So after all this, I've got a question for you. The next time an appraisal report lands on your desk, what's the very first thing you're going to check? Now you know. Thanks so much for tuning in.